177 years ago, a humble 14-year-old boy became a prophet of the Lord. Young Joseph Smith's declarations and teachings were accepted first by his family and then by close friends. The truth spread, first in New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, later in Missouri and Illinois. As the church grew, elders were sent to Canada, Great Britain, and Scandinavia. Thousands embraced the gospel and immigrated to Zion. Theirs was the challenge to endure persecution, privation, sorrow, and death as they sought to establish the kingdom of God. They were firm in their testimonies, and when their long journey was completed, even before the first towns were built, these faithful saints again served missions. They came also to Texas. This is their courageous story, and ours. For the prophet Daniel declared that the God of heaven shall set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, a stone cut out of the mountain without hands, and it shall stand forever. Daniel 2:44-45. The year was 1900. The automobile had been born. Telegraph communications spanned the continent. The transcontinental railroad had tied the country together. No longer would the saints pull hand carts in a treacherous cross-country journey. A train trip from New York City to Salt Lake City was now a comfortable 17 days. The Mormons were colonizing the Intermountain West, and the Civil War was 35 years in the past. The country was rushing into the 20th century. There was a spirit of progress in the air. William and Wasine Williamson moved from Louisiana to Texas in 1867. They found a rich land and economic opportunities in cattle ranching and farming. They homesteaded a site in the coal settlement. By 1900, they had been married 46 years and were the parents of 15 children. Absalom Cole married one of the Williams' daughters. 1900 would prove to be an important year for them all, and for all of us.
My second great-grandparents, William and Joycine Williamson, even though Christian and charitable people, William had never joined any church. They took an elderly, old sick man by the name of Mr. Busley and cared for him until his death. Mr. Busley told him the story of when he was in Johnston's army and how he was sent to Utah Territory to investigate the Mormons and Brigham Young. He told him what a great man Brigham Young was and how the Mormons were happy and prosperous people. William Williamson said that if he ever had the chance, he would join that church.
Unknown to William, two elders of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints had been assigned to work in nearby Jasper County. One day, Elder James G. Reed and Joseph A. Brooks, hampered by rain and mud, lost their way and wandered into Orange County on foot, trying to get around the swamp.
The place was called Weiss Bluff. It had rained some the night before, and it was very cloudy. We started out on a road, but we got lost. We came to a place. The man's name was Williamson. He was a very nice old gentleman. We took dinner with him. He asked us if we would stop and preach with him that night. We had got a little out of our county, but we told him we would stay and preach.
3 months later, Elder Reed returned to visit and teach the Williamsons, including the married children and their families. They were still interested and eager to hear the gospel. On 20 April 1900, William and his wife Wasine were baptized. The stone cut out of the mountain was beginning to roll.
My third great-grandmother, Jocelyn, lost 5 children in death. She grieved, however, most severely for one in particular who had never been baptized into any religion. His name was Abel. When the missionaries taught her the concept of baptism for the dead, she felt strongly in her heart that the gospel was true, that there was an opportunity for this beloved son to receive that sacred ordinance of baptism. We have a letter written by Abel to his sister Zilly shortly before he was killed in a logging accident. Dear sister, I am writing to let you know that I am well and hope that you are all the same. I have the finest girl in the South. I see her every day. I have her picture. I will bring it to show you. I will be home when the peaches are ripe.
The extended family accepted baptism, with Epsy being the first, and with the Stevensons, Coles, Tremeys, Gentrys, and Bakers following them soon after. William died 21 November 1900. His life as a member of the church had been short. He could not have foreseen, except with the eye of faith, the far-reaching effects of his humble decision to be baptized. In 1914, Williamson became a branch with Calvin Williamson as the branch president. In 1918, Williamson sent out its first missionary, Elder George Christman, who served in North Texas. Other missionaries were working in Hardin and Tyler counties. In February 1900, elders baptized Marcus, Mary, and Bithy Ann Hare, and Rebecca Kirkendall. These four were the first baptisms in our area. Claude and Mary Dulaney, Jesse and Lizzie Crosby, the James and Lizzie Odom family, and George and Violet Rebecca Kirkpatrick followed soon after.
The 15th of February 1900, we then went back to Kirkendall's. Elder Dana baptized one of their sons, Alfred Clinton Kirkendall, and I confirmed him. That made 5 Elder Dana had baptized in that settlement.
Although there were few members in the area, the stone cut out of the mountain had begun to pick up speed. And then in 1901, oil was discovered near Beaumont. The gusher at Spindletop would forever alter the economics of the area.
Tuesday, 30th of April, 1901, Hardin County. This morning after eating breakfast, we bid Brother Burnett and family goodbye and left the settlement. We went about 4 miles. There was a terrible excitement in the county about oil. They had struck some very rich oil wells in Beaumont and seemed to think that there was oil in this place. They had first come around leasing the land possible and were now buying it. Land was settling all the way from $15 to $50 per acre in Hardin County.
An event occurred in 1901 which changed missionary work and the nature of the local church forever. Prior to this date, church policy was to encourage new converts to move to the West, where the church was strong. In 1901, President James G. Duffin of the Central States Mission wrote to the First Presidency recommending that local saints stay and build up the church in their own areas.
The idea was presented to the presidency of the church and received their approval. Almost immediately, 4 colonies were established in the state of Texas.
In 1901, an LDS church building was erected at Pleasant Hill, and the little log church was constructed at Williamson. Built by family members, neighbors, and the traveling elders, these buildings signaled the roots being put down by the local saints.
And I remember going to Sunday school. The adults would sit in the main room there in the little log church house and have their lessons. But the young people, the kids, all went outside and had a bench, and some of us would sit on that and some of us would sit on the ground.
Prejudice threatened to erode the missionary effort at Odom. Pleasant Odom and his family had lived there 9 years, undisturbed by non-members. When elders Dana and Falkman began proselytizing, the locals, fearful there would be more baptisms, bragged they would tar and feather the missionaries and run them out of the country.
Lizzie Odom Crosby was at home when a mob rode up looking for the elders. She told them that the elders were at her father's house, Pleasant Odom, who is my great-grandfather. The mob went over to Pleasant's house, and he knew they were coming, so he was ready for them and came out onto the porch with a shotgun. He told them that the first one that got off their horse was going to get hurt. The mob decided to leave peacefully.
A mob never threatened the Odoms again, and the church continued to grow in Odom, Williamson, Silsby, and Evadale. Some of the Odom saints moved to the northern part of Tyler County, establishing a community called Emily. They built a little church there.
Some of the Odom relatives moved into the community of Fred. There, the Delaneys opened their home, a small two-room log house, for them to hold their mission Sunday school classes. The elders preached and sang, and when that got too small for them, the Moores opened their larger home for them.
The missionaries also proselyted elsewhere in Orange County, particularly in the city of Orange, and ultimately the Bland, Peebato, and Tartar families joined in subsequent visits, as did Anna Laura Griffith and her daughter, Frances Rebecca. Sunday schools were organized in Silsbee, Odom, and Williamson. Meetings were held with prayers, singing, scripture recitations, talks, and classes. In Silsbee in 1904, when Mary Alexander Frazier's husband, Willie Thomas Mulder, was baptized, he deeded to the church an acre of land 7 miles northeast of Silsbee, and a small chapel was built there. The list of members at that time included the Mulder, Dulaney, Frazier, Hoke, Hartman, Moore, and Morris families. After Brother Mulder's death, the church organized a Sunday school at Kirkpatrick Settlement, with Brother Kirkpatrick as the superintendent.
We worked in Evadale and Silsbee. The saints would travel from Buna to Silsbee or meet in the Goins' home when the missionaries were in town. It was about this time when the people started to get the hatred out of their system. But I was offered a time or two to get off the place at the point of a gun.
Meanwhile, church population was beginning to swell in Jefferson County as more people came to work in the refineries, shipyards, and related industries. Beaumont, which had been proselyted since 1904, began to get some growth. Frank and Ethel Hilliard, Sally Mae Peterson, Asa Baker, and Millie Nobles Pruitt were baptized. A mission conference was held in Beaumont in 1919.
It was one tough district. Many doors were slammed in our faces. One man even drove me off his property, offered to beat me up and called me all kinds of names. It's the worst I ever had. We spent Christmas in Port Arthur. There was an ice storm, trees all over the ground, and 30,000 cattle dead in Jefferson County.
Descendants of the Perry family moved to Port Arthur after the war to work in the oil industry in 1921. Lillian Briggs Cunningham, Ivy and Effie Leach came to the area in 1923, and the Eugene Tisdales from Georgia and Israel Abbotts from Utah came in 1925. Unlike the other area saints, the Port Arthur members were united not by blood, but by the refining industry. Missionaries came to Port Arthur as early as 1923 and found a small group of Latter-day Saints, most of whom were lifelong members, originally from somewhere else. Port Arthur became the elders' headquarters as they visited and tracted in outlying areas.
We visited the Port Arthur city officials to obtain permission to hold street meetings. The mayor said yes, but the chief of police said no. He wouldn't hear of it. He left us, and we sat there in his office, decided to visit the city attorney. He said he saw no reason why we shouldn't hold the meetings and gave us a letter for the chief of police. We showed it to him, and he softened up a bit. He said we could hold the meetings, but not on the main streets. The people in Port Arthur are very receptive. They've received us with open arms. We've sold many books of Mormon and have left several tracts in their homes.
Missionaries were staying at Redden Cole's home in Beaumont when a hurricane struck at the end of March 1926.
During the night, a severe Gulf storm and cyclone struck the area. Brother Reed and Cole's home where we were staying was the only one we knew of that wasn't totally destroyed, and it was severely damaged. We weren't hurt. For the next 5 days, we toured Orange and Evadale and stopped by Williamson for a celebration marking the 96th anniversary of the church. More than 300 people attended.
In December, Elder David O. McKay of the Council of the 12 met in conference in Houston. 5 local brethren accepted calls for short-term missions to include Calvin Williamson, branch president, who labored in Houston, and John Elbert Tucker of Emily, who labored in Walker County. By 1928, there were 5 branches with 755 members in the South Texas district. At Williamson, the annual 24 of July Pioneer Celebration had gotten bigger every year, despite the Depression. 4,000 people turned out for the festivities in 1928.
A large crowd gathered at Cal and Sadie Williamson's ranch. Beginning at 10 a.m., there was a program of music, prayers, talks, and readings. Then lunch was served. 7 beef, 2,200 pounds of barbecue sandwiches were given away. Horse racing and stunts followed, and then a rodeo. At 3, a dance began, which lasted till midnight. Music was provided by a 7-piece orchestra. There were soda water and ice cream stands. A prominent lawyer, Mr. Dyes, remarked that this celebration is one of the biggest things of its kind and put over by the smallest group of people that I know of in the state of Texas. Such an achievement, such hospitality, is seldom found.
Beaumont also remembers the year 1928. A dependent Sunday school was organized. 14 families made up the membership, including the Smith family, Isabel Hargraves, Bernice Redding, Ida Odom, Sidney Williamson, and the William and Vida Bland Morris family. In 1931, Millie Williamson, later Franklin, served a short-term mission in South Jefferson County. The mission annual report of 1930 showed 790 members in the South Texas district, including 156 children. In June of 1934, Richard and Nellie Knope, second-generation members, moved with their 2 young sons to Lake Charles, Louisiana. Missionaries soon visited them and began holding cottage meetings. 3 years later, tracting missionaries found Brother Dan Bass living in Westlake, Louisiana. Brother Bass had been baptized as a child in Kuntz, Hardin County, 30 years earlier. His parents had been baptized just 6 weeks after William Williamson.
The Saints moved into the Oddfellows Hall on Ryan Street in Lake Charles. This was a dark and dismal place, and it reeked of cigar and cigarette smoke. They had to throw open the windows to get more light, and when they did, they didn't have any screens, so they feared that the children might fall out. Before the meetings would start, they would have to sweep up the cigarette butts and the beer bottles.
Orange, like Lake Charles, did not begin to grow until the 30s, though their earliest members date to 1905 with the baptisms of the Bland and Pivotal. Doris Davis, Peyton, and Maud Dobbs, Lonita and Myra Turner, the Theodore Wilson family, Lafayette and Ida Bland Tarter, and 7 Pivotos are listed in the list of members for 1931, along with Anna Laura Griffith, who was baptized in 1921, and whose daughter, Frances Rebecca, had married J. Elbert Tucker from Emily. They were still meeting wherever 2 or 3 could gather.
I was 5 years old in 1938 when my parents joined the church in Orange, Texas. Sunday school was held in our home for several years after that. And I can remember as a child, my brother and I's class was held around the kitchen table, and we would dip our finger in the syrup pitcher, which left fond, sweet memories of the gospel to us.
And that's how it all began. The stone that was cut out of the mountain in 1900 had built momentum. It would soon encompass a large group of saints living here in Southeast Texas.
He is trampling out posterity of the pioneers or whether you were baptized only yesterday, each is the beneficiary of their great undertaking. What a wonderful thing it is to have behind us a great and noble body of progenitors. What a marvelous thing to be the recipients of a magnificent heritage that speaks of the guiding hand of the Lord, of the listening ear of his prophets, of the total dedication of a vast congregation of saints who loved this cause more than life itself. Small wonder that so many hundreds of thousands of us, yea, even millions, will pause this coming July to remember them, to celebrate their wondrous accomplishments, and to rejoice in the miraculous thing that has grown from the foundation they laid.
From our very small beginnings, we have grown. There is a monument in the Williamson Cemetery which reads, "The heritage of the past is the seed that brings forth the harvest of the future." The harvest truly is great.